Today in the club, we're exploring the largest naval battle ever fought between two South American countries. The Battle of Riachuelo takes place in the summer of 1865 between regional upstart Paraguay and its much larger neighbor, the Empire of Brazil. I'm staging this fascinating battle using my 1200 model ships with 5 players. Can our club rewrite the history of this decisive engagement, which marked the turn of the tide in the so-called War of the Triple Alliance? And what the heck is the War of the Triple Alliance? South American history is, I hate to admit, not well studied here in the United States. For those of us in this country, the 1860s are all about the American Civil War. It's all too easy for us to forget that while our country was being ripped apart, several new nations in South America were embroiled in a very nasty war of their own from 1864 to 1870. To understand why this war was fought in the first place, you need to understand the volatile state of affairs in South America at this time. The Spanish and Portuguese yoke had only recently been thrown off, and all of these countries that we know today as Paraguay, Argentina, Brazil, and Uruguay were quite new in 1864. So new, in fact, that border disputes between them were common and violent. The Paraguayan War erupts in October 1864, and it eventually is called the War of the Triple Alliance when 3 other nations ally against Paraguay. So why the heck would tiny landlocked Paraguay start a war down here, you ask? There are a lot of complicated domestic and international politics at play that we don't have time to unpack. But what you need to know is that despite its size, Paraguay was a respectable regional power at this time. It was a reasonably well-governed military dictatorship run by this guy, Francisco Lopez, who fancied himself the Napoleon of his age. And honestly, who didn't at this period in history? One of the main prizes at stake in this new war will be the control of the Panara River, the second longest river in South America. For an otherwise landlocked country like Paraguay, access to this river running all the way to the Atlantic Ocean was a prize worth fighting to control. In the early phase of the war, Paraguay's central position allows it to score some quick victories, but that's about to change with the naval battle we fight today. It's June 1865, and the Paraguayan River Fleet, an ad hoc collection of 9 ships, plans a surprise attack on the Brazilian fleet anchored near the fortress of Humaita. It's a bold and unusual plan, calling for the attackers to quietly approach under cover of darkness and board the Brazilian ships in a sudden rush. Well, at least that was the plan made by Generalissimo Lopez, our would-be Napoleon. But Lopez does not personally lead the attack, and it fails to arrive until almost 9 a.m., well behind schedule. There was also a fog hanging over the river, making it hard to see. And so the Paraguayan fleet commander, Captain Mesa, disobeys his orders and instead opens fire at the anchored Brazilian ships as he passes them by. The gunnery has little effect and only serves to alert the Brazilians. Their admiral, Barroso, raises anchor and aggressively orders his ships to pursue the enemy at once, meeting the Paraguayan fleet as it makes a turn to swing back around for another pass. And that is where our war game begins. Mid-morning, June 11th, as the fog is burning off, and the Paraguayans have blown the element of surprise. I've set up a 6x8 tabletop to represent the area of the Paraná River where the action takes place. The Paraguayans have an army shore battery overlooking the river, and their fleet of 9 ships includes some towed mortar barges called chatas. The Brazilian fleet under Admiral Barroso is steaming to meet them. These are 1200 scale ships from Spithead Miniatures. Today, there are a number of other manufacturers who make these ships as well, and we'll list them in the notes below. One of the great things about these models is how relatively affordable they are, and if you're going to get into something as obscure as South American naval battles, you want some models that are small, easy to store, and reasonably priced. The rules I'm using for today's game are a homebrew set I whipped up myself. It's a very quick and easy 2-page game. As we get into the battle, I'll explain some of the key concepts. The Brazilian fleet captains are Miles, Greg, and Dave. Their pre-battle plan is fairly textbook. They aim to proceed in a column along the shore of the river, using the islands to shield them from the guns of the shore batteries on the far bank. Once behind the islands, they will lure the enemy fleet into battle in this narrow channel. Keith, taking the role of Captain Mesa, commands the Paraguayan fleet with Ed. Their plan is less imaginative, but way more fun. I'll let Ed narrate the pre-battle strategy.
Please be seated. I've been asked to brief you on our thinking going into the recent naval engagement with Brazil. We thought we'd be at a disadvantage trading blows in a traditional battle line fight. the enemy possessed bigger ships and bigger guns. Captain Meza instead opted to embrace ramming, hoping to smash the van of the enemy column and take advantage of our superior revolutionary zeal to take fouled ships by boarding. We were to operate whenever possible in a single column at maximum speed. Rapido was the watchword of the day. And the captain emphasized that we were to ignore the risks of sandbars and accept the risk of grounding if it meant we could more quickly come to grips with the enemy.
I do love a bit of foreshadowing, so we'll leave Ed's comments there and proceed to the action. On turn 1, there's a brief exchange of long-range ineffective gunnery as the Paraguayans pick up steam and increase their speed, closing rapidly in a single column just as they planned. The unexpected speed change surprises the Brazilian line, which is unable to get behind the islands to set up their position as they had hoped. And so, very early in the scenario, the Paraguayan flagship, captained by Keith, is set to crash into the enemy with full force. At point-blank range, Dave's Brazilian ships open fire.
Crap.
Holy mackerel.
Not a 1.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Wow!
This is a
Wow! Oh, yeah, look at that one.
When we return to port, I assume you will be the Presidente, and I would like to have the Admiralty. That's all right?
Yeah. Are you guys shooting here? Despite bringing a lot of guns to bear, Dave's fire is ineffective, and the Paraguayan flagship, the 620-ton Taquari, emerges through the smoke for a ram attack. The ram fails to sink the target, but with the ships now fouled and tangled, Keith launches a boarding action and successfully captures his first prize of the day. It's a good start for the Paraguayans, but as the rest of their line breaks off to continue down the river, it engages in a close-range gunnery duel with the Brazilians. Here, the more heavily armed Brazilian fleet has an advantage and dishes out heavy punishment. Well, you would be able to shoot into that whole thing. So
We'll shoot into that whole thing.
You got 1, 2, 3 dice, 1 more for the squadron, 1 for short range. All right, Dave.
Make him hurt,
Okay.
Dave. Make him hurt.
He already got his chip, and he didn't even roll.
That's right.
Uh-oh.
2?
Do it.
No saving throw for you guys since you're opposed to the concept.
I didn't say that.
The two opposing lines sail past each other, hammering away with close-range fire. Shooting in this game is pretty simple, with ships rolling a fistful of 6-sided dice, always needing a 5 or better to score a hit. As you can see on the ship record sheets I made, a player then rolls a 6-sided dice to determine whether the hits are against steam, manpower, or hull boxes. There are some free repair boxes you can cross off to soak up extra damage as well. One issue I have with a lot of naval games is that the movement can get fiddly. For this homebrew system, I designed a basic set of movement cards, and players have to assign their squadrons 3 cards from the deck. You can move directly ahead or turn up to 45 degrees port or starboard. This requires a little bit of planning on the part of the players, but it keeps the movement easy to resolve. The initial Paraguayan ram attack had the effect of splitting the Brazilian battle line, and by the midpoint of our battle they have chosen to split their column into 3 distinct formations, with Greg circling around the shoreline, Miles turning downriver, and Dave turning upriver. Miles and Dave both come under heavy fire from the Paraguayan shore battery, which manages to damage multiple ships. And unlike the Brazilians, Keith and Ed have been able to maintain most of their formation as a single battle line. But Greg is quickly closing in on the tail end of that line, hoping to pick off easy prey. That job is going to be made much easier by the fact that Keith's last ship has sailed too close to the shoreline, running aground in shallow waters.
Oh, hey! Cool. Son of a bitch.
Bueno.
Oh!
Boo!
Slide him up there and board away.
Boarding!
Oh, man.
We're coming on, boys!
5, difference of 3 will get you a strike. Target ship surrenders, attacker loses 1 man.
That's like... We took their flagship!
You're like a vulture.
We took their flagship!
Get them, they're backing up.
Right, yeah, right. Get that tiny little boat! That dinghy! We got
I
one!
believe this was actually formerly a Brazilian ship.
Oh, well, it returns home, yes. Come home.
I recognize that.
Come back to me, le bébé.
All right, you lost one.
We were
box.
going
I lose a box?
Yeah.
Okay.
Don't let Greg's celebration fool you. Yes, he's taken a ship, but it's only a small steamboat.
What number are we?
You are number one. And number one, 3 sixes.
Not fast.
You gotta make,
It says fast.
Oh, okay.
you gotta make 3 saves.
Oh, yeah.
I think you really do have to make 3 saves here. There's a problem.
Don't tell me that.
Come on, Keith. There's gonna be a problem.
Watch this.
I'm watching. I'm watching.
Oh.
Oh, come on. Come on.
I took one. Son of a. Is that gonna sink us?
Do you have an extra one to use?
Yeah.
Use it?
Okay.
Keith uses a leader action to save a critical hit, frustrating Greg's attempts to bring him under fire at the tail end of the column. And at the front end of the line, the gunnery duel between Dave and Ed is evenly fought, with both sides dishing out moderate damage. In the waning phase of the action, Keith's flagship, the Takare, the one that conducted the initial ram attack to start this engagement, is still trying to limp away and escape the action. But she's caught by the elements of Miles' squadron and sent to the bottom of the river in a final blaze of glory. As our scenario draws to a conclusion, each side has lost 2 ships, with many others battered. But compared to the historical outcome, Keith and Ed have put up a far better showing than their historical Paraguayan counterparts. The Battle of the Riachuelo was a major victory for the Empire of Brazil in 1865, but not so today. Perhaps this will not be the turning point in the War of the Triple Alliance after all. I hope you guys enjoyed our first foray into South American military history. Are there other obscure battles or conflicts you'd like us to take a look at? If so, leave a comment below.